Good evening, tube scoobers and boob loobers. Yeehaw! My eyes are killing me. Ow. Man, this right eye. Wow. Like 10 out of 10. Anyway, enough of that. It's 10 after 1 in the morning. And I can guarantee you that Amtrak, Joe's kitty is sitting downtown. Anyway, focus. All right, so what I've been doing this evening is the goal was to augment my MIDI bass pedal capability by adding a left-hand controller that will work in tandem with the MIDI bass pedals. The Mojo pedals made by Crumar, which is an Italian company of questionable integrity, but I will say this, that the late great Joey DiFrancesco was playing a Crumar instrument for the last few years of his touring life. So he became a Crumar clinician, spokesperson, and was playing a Crumar Joey DiFrancesco model double manual organ, and he seemed to like it just fine. So in terms of ragging on the quality of an Italian company, I don't know. I bought these Mojo pedals because they were cheap, $400, including shipping, which was a good deal. And so you have to work with them like anything. I've had to work with them. The biggest thing was to choose whether or not to use velocity triggering when you play bass pedals. And I had velocity turned on because I'm pretty sensitive when I play. So if I play changes on the piano, it kind of translates to my foot, so I had velocity turned on so that I could have dynamic shaping nuances of the bass notes, loud and soft with the pressure of my foot, and when I'm playing pretty well, it works just fine, because as a musician, you feed dynamics into your fingertips and into whatever you're playing with. If your foot, you're just naturally, if you're playing with feeling, are going to control the velocity with how hard or how soft you hit your foot. It's just part of being a good artist, a good musician. And so I had velocity turned on. And then tonight I decided to add a left-hand controller as well, because when you play the gig, I'm not proficient enough yet on a 13-note pedal board to play every style of music that would be required of certainly not a commercial gig, but of potentially a jazz gig where you would need to play up-tempo straight 4, or other things where my foot may not be able to keep up. And so I have many rigs that have this exact left-hand bass. So playing the acoustic piano, this Kanabi century-old baby grand, is new to me because it's been sitting in our living room. And as I mentioned before, I learned to play on this piano. And therefore I had a stigma against it because when I sit down to play, it makes me feel like a kid again. And I had to get over that. And so I said, I'm going to get over that. And I'm going to use this piano. So herein lies that purpose, that goal to use this piano. And I'm doing it. So what it meant was having bass pedals. So no big deal with that. I did a previous video with the Krumar Mojo pedals. So today, I've been thinking about this for a day or two. I said I have MIDI merge boxes. So the U220 that makes my great sampled upright bass sound that I've used since probably 1993. I discovered the U220 and that wonderful upright bass sample. So I'm no stranger to it, but the Roland U220 is multi-timbral. It can act as a module for a MIDI sequencer and gives you more than just one synth. Multi-timbral means that you can divide it into different tone modules with different MIDI channels and different patches. It's multi-timbral. So it can do more than just play bass at one time. It can do up to, I think, 8 different instruments, including percussion and drums. And rarely do I use that. I had it set up out in the garage where I'm playing bass. I finally added in some of the synth patches as I reprogrammed it. So I started to crack open that potential of using it for more than just playing, say, bass, because there are other good sounds in there. So this was the perfect opportunity to test that capability. And so the test was that the bass sound that I use with the Krumar Mojo pedals is my same acoustic upright sampled bass, but the envelope on it is tweaked slightly differently. Because when you play with your foot, you're going to play ballads or slower tunes, so you want the sustain to be longer as you play slower tempo tunes. And so I programmed an additional patch, an offshoot of my normal patch. And so the normal patch that I play, that I have been playing for a long time, and I recently even tweaked it a little bit too, is this. No big deal here. I use the KX5. Same setup, and I've had this Ampeg acoustic bass. Ampeg baby bass. No. This Ampeg B3 bi-amped bass amp has been my only bass amp that I've ever owned. So when I have used this sample, often triggered with the DX7 sitting on top of the piano to play Traveling Notes, the kids' theater show, musical theater show by Scott Hurley and Cassandra Valerie, starring Brandon Hurley. I use this sound with this amp, with the acoustic piano. basically, it's nothing new, but it's new for this particular situation because I didn't have the KX5 up here. I had the Mojo pedals triggering the bass sound with a slightly altered bass sound. So I did a video the other day with the Mojo pedals showing how it blends so nicely with the piano. But I added the KX5 to the setup tonight with a MIDI merge box so that I would have two options. I could either play the bass pedals with my foot, or I could reach up and I could play left-hand bass the way I normally do. Two options. So that meant having to understand this Kanabi century-old baby grand piano. So at first I took the fall board off and was looking at building a shelf to go above the keyboard where I normally put the bass unit, the KX5. And I found a way that I could do that, but as it turns out, it was just really easiest to remove the music rack because there are two rails on either side that the mahogany music rack sits on, right? So this is the music rack, of course, so that you put your music on, your books. Well, my father, he made that because when he got this Kanabi Baby Grand from a military soldier back in gee whiz, I don't know when. It was at our 1821 McGugan Roadhouse before we moved to Westchester in 1978. So we got this piano when we lived on McGugan Road, which was the early 70s, and it didn't have a fall board, so he made one, this, out of mahogany. So anyway, that's just an aside. Take the music rack off. There are two rails on inside the wood of the piano, and I just cut me a 1x4 and set it on the same rails, and the keyboard just sits right on top. So only about 45 minutes worth of brainstorming to solve that problem. And then the issue became, the goal was to use only one module, the U220, but I use a different sound when I play bass with my left hand and bass with my foot. So I needed to use the multi-timbral capabilities of the U220 to set up three different receive channels, three different tone modules, well really two to begin with. One with the bass pedals. Now you can hear that these sustain longer, the notes sustain longer. And if I hold my foot down on the pedal, it sustains. Which is good because you want that in a ballad. So it sustains, and therefore you are not going to play fast swing with your foot. You're going to play slower tempos. You can play bosses. Anyway, I'm very tired because I've already been playing and I've already set all this stuff up. So this has been, I'm on probably my third hour of working up here. So in terms of showing you examples, I'm going to have to get in to playing again in a minute when you can start to hear and feel, and then it just comes naturally. When you're not feeling it, it's very unnatural. But anyway, I need a MIDI merge box to merge the output of the KX5, which is here, which uses a different bass sound than this. It uses shorter notes, right? So I can play faster tempos. That is what you play with your left hand, but what you play with your foot. I'm trying. So you can go back and forth, which is what you do when you play the Hammond console B3C3 or A100. They, like Joey DeFrancesco, would play bass with your left hand, but seamlessly go down and play bass with your foot at the same time. So I am emulating that on a baby grand, and with only 13 notes. And in the process, once I got my MIDI merge set up and the output of the KX5 and the Mojo pedals going into the merge device, which in turn feeds the U220, which has a multi-patch set up with two different bass sounds, one for the pedals and one for the KX5. Yes, that's what I did. So the goal, in the process of having done that, I ended up tweaking the patch for the bass pedal. So I ended up experimenting with velocity to match the sound of what comes out of the KX5, which we all know is an excellent top of the line keyboard controller because it uses the famed Yamaha DX7 leaf switches under the keys, which is why it's such a great controller. If you were playing this with a cheese ass synth keyboard, it would not sound anywhere near the same. It is the Yamaha leaf switch action that was also used in the Korg M1 and I think the Roland D50 that made those instruments so great because it's expressive in the way that it responds to velocity from your fingertips. So I sat here and went back and forth. Now obviously the KX5 velocity is turned on and it has a shorter sustain, so I can play more musically. I can play staccato, I can play harder, I can play softer. But when you play with the pedals, you can't really do that with your foot. Your feet aren't gonna, certainly not gonna, with 2 feet doing that. So you need a slightly different sound. So I matched them. And I ended up taking the velocity off of the Mojo pedals. There are functions as you go through the functions on the Mojo pedals. One is you can set the MIDI channel. You can set a control pedal to use a MIDI continuous controller, which I'm using controller number 7, which I have a volume pedal plugged in, set to controller 7, which will control the volume of the sample being triggered by the Mojo pedals. It doesn't have a volume knob, so you need some way to set the volume of your bass sound, so I'm using a foot pedal to do that. You can set the octave of these pedals with the touch of your foot. You can go up almost, I think, 5 octaves and down. You can send program changes out, but the number one thing that what you can do is you can turn velocity on or off. So I had velocity on, it was working fine. I decided, like most bass players, including my dad, that you don't have time to really be thinking about your leg is a dynamic controller, so you really want your bass sound just to respond to the slightest touch. So I took velocity off, and that was not the easy solution. There was a fair amount of tweaking that had to go on with the patch in the U220, which is velocity sensitivity, that you can set from -7 to +7 to see the way that the key will affect the trigger. So when you take velocity off, all of a sudden the notes become really loud, and then you need to scale them down with that velocity sensitivity. And I also ended up tweaking the envelope, the ADSR, to get it to be cleaner, but to still have an attack. It doesn't have the dynamic impact of this. It's a little pooey-poo. So I don't feel it nearly like I feel this KX5, but it's adequate. And now it's as if it has a compressor on the bass, which makes the things smooth in volume, so that as you play a ballad, you're going to get a more professional and a better result. So that is what I was playing with. So once I got that kind of, it's interesting that even though I can't control the volume of the bass pedals with my toe, all these notes are the same. The volume still varies because of acoustic phenomena happening in the house, the acoustics of your house, these aircraft, these trains. Constantly there's infrasound. There's a standing wave, so the bass notes, the pitch, and not the pitch, but the volume is always fluctuating. Loud, soft, all the time. So it's almost built into your playing. So even though I'm going to play softly with my foot because I'm playing a quiet tune, the bass notes aren't going to get more quiet, but it's interesting as you phrase, you can kind of control the volume by playing ahead of beat or behind the beat. How long you hold your foot down on the note. You take your foot off of it, then it naturally decays. I hold my foot down, it sustains. Okay, so these notes, bass notes, are a little too loud. For playing a ballad, so I reach over and press down on the pedal a little bit. So tonight is the first time that I've experimented with taking the velocity off of the bass pedal, so I'm not positive I'm going to stick with it, but it means you're going to be more adjusting the volume pedal from tune to tune, but hopefully you're going to get into a groove where it's just going to be musical and you're just going to play and you're going to get your volume set. But once I got those bass pedals going, I had the brainstorm of, well, gee, this is a multi-timbral unit, so I have two different bass sounds. Two different, what do you call them? Polyphonic channels, right? You can divide it into different tone modules, not just one, but 8 with different sounds on each MIDI channel. So I was like, oh, well, gee whiz, so once, if I get playing a ballad, on these pedals. Okay, so I'm playing bass pedals with my feet, so why not reach up here and change the MIDI channel on my controller, which the KX5 can transmit on MIDI channel 1 or 2, and set up yet one more polyphonic MIDI channel, tone module. I'll think of what the word is. It's multi-timbral, so each one of those multi-timbral units. And why not use it and say, let's have a sustained sound. So I'll go up one more level and I have velocity on the U220, so this JX 3P string sound, I spent some time tweaking the ADSR on it and the velocity response to get it to be like strings that swell in. musicality of musical expression with just a little bit of JX 3-piece strings, which are fairly well known. And needless to say, I don't have this string patch going through anything particular. There's no PA, there's no keyboard amplification here. It's coming through the bass amp in mono, but hey, use what you have. And if you were at a gig, you know, I reach up here, push a button, and I'm ready to play something different up here with the bass, you know. So that is tonight's quest of music using upright bass with the acoustic piano in the best way that you can. Thank you very much.